My name is Amanda Waldrop, and I'm with the Kentucky Department of Education. Welcome to the fifth webcast in our series that is done in collaboration with each of our special education regional cooperatives across the state. Our topic for today is supporting behavior during NTI. Before we get started, just a friendly reminder to please mute your mics and turn off your camera to save bandwidth so that everyone can join. Also, if you have questions, there's a QR and access code on the screen to go Soapbox. We will use the questions for FAQ or address them in future webcasts. So now I'm going to turn it over to our first presenter, Doug Smith with the Kentucky Valley Educational Cooperative. Thank you.
Today's webcast will be looking at ways to support behavior during non-traditional instruction. This session is divided into three components: support for administrators, supports for teachers, and supports for parents and families. The link to the resources in this webcast can be found in the chat box. First, we will look at supports for administrators. This flowchart has been created as a tool to facilitate this work. The following slides will guide you through this process. This chart and the guiding questions will be provided as a supplemental resource. For today, we will focus on the following essential question. Are the behavior goals going to continue to be effective, appropriate, implementable during NTI days? The color coding system used in the flowchart above will help you navigate the resources. Green or yes means go. You're able to continue the instruction and data collection as you did before the NTI setting. Yellow or somewhat cautions you to slow down, as this goal is going to need some extra considerations and you'll possibly need to make minor adjustments. Finally, red or no means that there are possible barriers to implementing the behavior goal. The key here is to do something and document what you are doing. If your initial answer on the flowchart is yes, then continue with your behavior goal as currently implemented. However, there may be a few considerations that will help facilitate your instructional decision making. You might ask yourself or your team a question like, is the student making progress during NTI days with the specially designed instruction that I'm providing? Or ask yourself, do I have a plan for collecting progress data for students with or without digital access? Sometimes the behavior goals can continue to be effective, appropriate, and implementable in the context of NTI with some minor tweaks to the system that is in place. Review the guiding questions and ask yourself if an adjustment needed to continue with the behavior goal is written. Ask yourself if the goal can be continued when implemented in a small group, such as with siblings, or can parents or siblings implement the goals. Also look at what type of adjustments need to be made in order to continue to implement the goal. A behavior example could be before NTI, the teacher observed students' unexpected behaviors of blurting out in math class and recorded those using a frequency count. During NTI, the teacher observed the students' unexpected behaviors of blurting out in virtual small group and recorded the using a frequency count. In this example, there were minor adjustments and the behavior goal was left intact. It is important to document the adjustments that were made and continue with implementation. In some situations, the behavior goals that we have in place do not smoothly transition to the context of NTI days. When this occurs, we need to address the possible barriers, find a solution, and document our efforts. Consider this example. Before NTI, the teacher provided a prompt to choose a preferred task when given two options. The student used a communication device and a system of least prompts to select the choice. The teacher recorded the responses in a frequency chart. Now, during the NTI, the teacher provides a prompt to choose a preferred task when given two options. The student doesn't respond to the prompt via technology-based options, and the parent is unable to follow the prompt hierarchy. Some questions you may ask yourself are, can the student responses be recorded and submitted? Could you train the parent on the prompt hierarchy? Is there consistent communication with the family? And what are some other things that can be done? The key is you have to do something. Do the best you can and document your good faith efforts. There are many options for documentation. Remember to refer to CEC's COVID-19 resources for options such as this one on the bottom right of the screen, which includes documentation of the IEP services we have provided and have attempted to provide. If the teacher is having difficulty gaining contact with the family or student, document this information and continue to check in on them on a regular basis to see if needs or if circumstances change that allow for an increase in participation and or instruction. Notice the column that allows a description of the SDI provided during NTI sessions. This form is also available on KDE's webpage and on the Kentucky DOS support website. Your district may require you to use a specific form. Please follow your district's protocol for documentation. The key here is to document. Schools will need this information to make instructional decisions for students with an IEP upon return to typical instructional practices. Next, we will transition to supports for teachers providing non-traditional instruction.
I am Marissa Waddy, and I'm a consultant with the Northern Kentucky Cooperative. Specially Designed Instruction, or SDI, is what the teacher does to instruct, assess, and reteach the student. Students with emotional and behavioral needs will require specially designed instructional strategies, as well as environmental supports and accommodations to have meaningful access to the standards based on their social and emotional well-being. When planning for SDI, we must consider the possible characteristics you see on the right. Difficulty developing or maintaining satisfactory interpersonal relationships, inappropriate affective or behavior responses to a normal situation. They may struggle with pervasive unhappiness, depression, or anxiety, physical symptoms, pains, or fears associated with personal or school problems, learning difficulties that cannot be explained by intellectual, sensory, or health factors. They may withdraw from social interactions or display aggression or other externalizing behaviors. SDI for NTI planning begins with transferring current comprehensive supports from school to the home setting. With family collaboration, we can continue to build social emotional skills and teach specific replacement behaviors. Effective EBD programming components and the PBIS framework provide us with the foundation to teach social emotional competencies. The key is to provide the same continuum of instruction and supports using consistent language with adjustments based on the NTI context and student needs in the current environment. Behavior goals may focus on one or more SEL competency skill areas. Self-management, which is the ability to manage emotions and behaviors to achieve one's goals. Self-awareness, or how well. Can we take a moment to mute our microphones, please?
Shouldn't be long.
Self-awareness, which is how well someone recognizes emotions, values, strengths, and limitations. Responsible decision-making. This involves making ethical, constructive choices.
I think our presenter was just muted.
Melissa, I think you've been muted.
Okay, I think we're ready now. Thanks for muting everyone else. Okay. Responsible decision-making. That involves making ethical, constructive choices about personal behavior. Relationship skills is the ability to form positive relationships, work in teams, and utilize conflict resolution skills. And finally, social awareness. This involves how we understand social cues and show empathy for others. The social emotional competencies give us an analysis of student strengths and deficits that can become targets for intervention in school and community. Social emotional needs are compounded in this time of crisis. So teaching these skills, rather than just reacting, becomes particularly challenging for students, families, teachers, and community providers. Each domain here provides an example of a skill deficit. Key considerations would be to review the appropriateness and clarity of the current behavior intervention plan and/or the behavior goals with the caregiver and any other community providers involved with the student. Determine if the current behavior needs are applicable in the current environment and tweak as necessary. The next step will be to implement the behavior plan, collaborate with the caregiver on putting home supports and interventions in place, provide resources and coaching to the caregivers, and develop a plan for monitoring. In the next several slides, we'll be highlighting what SDI in social emotional learning and behavioral education looks like in terms of SEL competencies. We'll also look at what considerations can be made for NTI. In other words, how do the activities or interventions on the IEP and/or behavior intervention plan look different in NTI, or do they? Let's take self-awareness, for example. A feelings meter or emotions chart can be used with the student the same way it's used in school. But how do we implement relationship skills? At home, the family can engage in a family project to practice getting along with others and understanding the perspective of others. Online chats or games could be hosted with classmates. We can support families by providing them with the tools, modeling the skills, and providing feedback. Teachers, caregivers, and students can provide and receive feedback during scheduled check-in sessions with the teacher. We must keep in mind that our students have experienced a significant transition into NTI without the preparation of transition planning. We need to reestablish safety with our students by fostering connection and creating a risk-free learning environment. You will see several examples in the SDI for Students with Behavior Needs During COVID document for how to create predictability and routine, build connection and relational safety, and offer choices to reestablish a sense of engagement and control for these learners. If a student's plan includes SDI for self-regulation, the teacher can use a feelings wheel to help the student gauge his own emotional level and encourage him by modeling, prompting, and giving feedback on calming and self-regulation strategies. The resource guide has links to available videos for teaching skills such as breathing strategies. The teachers can coach the caregivers on these strategies, as well as provide resources to families on managing their own emotional responses to student behaviors, and how and when to intervene on the escalation cycle. There are several ways to provide direct instruction and practice in goal setting and monitoring to support behavioral goals. For students on goal monitoring plans in a paper packet NTI setting, the teacher can use the Remind app to prompt the student or caregiver to monitor the goal and complete a goal setting activity throughout the day or the week. For caregivers serving as facilitators, the teacher can support the caregivers in setting short-term goals for both school and home activities, as well as scheduling goal monitoring check-ins. Simple timers found around the home can be used. To provide SDI in the use of token economies in a paper packet NTI setting, the teacher can include visual models and directions through PowerPoint and social stories. Phone calls, calendar reminders, and the Remind app can be used to prompt the student or caregiver to check in and award tokens. In an e-learning environment, interactive slides can be used to create and award tokens. For caregivers serving as facilitators of a token economy, the teacher can support the family in developing a manageable system for the home that supports both school and home activities. Teachers utilizing learning packets for teaching relationship skills may choose to send printed copies of social skill lessons and scenarios. For e-learning, teachers can provide SDI and social skills through interactive online platforms such as Kahoot, or by using some of the currently available resources provided by TeachTown, boystown.org, or Second Steps. Teachers may need to provide guidance to caregivers on how to engage the student with questions related to the skills being taught. Teachers utilizing learning packets for teaching social awareness skills can send printed copies of social skill lessons and scenarios focused on each student's replacement behaviors. For e-learning, teachers can provide SDI and social skills through interactive online sessions or by using some of the currently available resources seen here, including read-alouds and PBS Kids. Another example could be to use an online platform such as Zoom or Flipgrid to model examples and non-examples. Now that we've reviewed SDI for behavior within the NTI context, let's shift our focus to supporting families as facilitators of behavioral supports and strategies.
Hello, I'm Jim Fager with the Greater Louisville Education Cooperative. Virtual instruction during a pandemic created an unprecedented demand on many parents' time and resources and capacities. And as these demands approach and exceed the resources and capacities of the parents, feelings of insufficiency, inadequacy, or even failure may provoke increasing levels of stress. It's important to remember Perceptions of inadequacy, insufficiency, and failure activate our sympathetic nervous system. You'll remember the sympathetic nervous system is our built-in self-protective mechanism that we commonly refer to as fight or flight. So why does this happen? Well, it's because our body interprets all messages of danger as literal threats to our physical well-being. In turn, our brain activates a response that's very helpful in physically threatening events. However, when threats are indirect, such as financial, social, or family demands, fight or flight is often unhelpful and can even be harmful. It's critical then that we help parents reframe the demands as manageable and accomplishable. As we attempt to reframe the demands of our parents, it's important to have a good understanding of human motivation. Abraham Maslow can help us understand why a student may not be motivated to accomplish academic tasks during times of stress. I'm sure you'll remember Maslow was a psychologist who believed that all humans were motivated by a hierarchy of needs. And he expressed these thoughts in a well-known visual called Maslow's Hierarchy. Maslow stated that human motivation begins with a person's most basic needs. Those needs associated with survival are the most pressing. And as a result, it's understood that a person must first quench their thirst or satiate their hunger before they can be motivated to focus on activities such as studying for a test or creating an art project. It's reasonable to assume that focusing on academics can be difficult, maybe even impossible, for a student to accomplish when they're hungry or they're sleepy. So it's essential for a student to eat a good meal and have a good night's sleep before engaging in academics. All students must meet their physiological needs to be fully engaged in cognitive tasks. The basic biological and physiological needs we're talking about include such things as air and food, water, warmth, and sleep. Once physiological needs are met, the student's mind is free then to focus on safety needs, such as being protected, feeling secure, having a sense of order, and otherwise being free from fear. When the student's biological needs are secured and they feel safe, the student is then able to focus on love and belonging. At this level, trust is developed, and the student is able to become part of a group. As the student engages with other students and adults, they're able to establish a sense of dignity and self-esteem. And this is the level where they develop independence and begin to achieve. With the basic foundation of motivations in place, the student is now free to explore their potential. Here, they can consider how they may impact their world and how they fit into society. To summarize, improved academic outcomes are assured when a student's basic needs are met. This reduces the likelihood that foundational motivations are draining on the student's cognitive load. Keep in mind that all the pressures associated with the current pandemic may seem overwhelming, but there's an old adage that may help. How do you eat an elephant? Of course, we know the answer to that. It's one bite at a time. What we want to do is encourage you to remember Maslow's hierarchy and begin by meeting your students' basic needs first. Some important things to keep in mind are access to different means of communication and any obstacles or limitations with each of those means. For example, a student's family may use email, but sometimes emails aren't frequently used or they may go unchecked for a while. In regard to text messaging and phone calls, be mindful that families' phone numbers may change or they may have usage limits on their plans. Sometimes schools are using staff like Friskies or SROs to perform status checks on students when they're not able to be reached. Be mindful that the availability of those staff may be limited and vary from school to school, and that home visits may be intimidating for some families. Health and other risks also need to be carefully considered and planned for with these types of communication. Once we make contact with the family, it's important to think through your approach and what you plan to communicate about. If you jump straight to your personal agenda, maybe you're calling to discuss IEP implementation, you might not be as well received. So what we do, we recommend that you think about the hierarchy of needs we've been talking about and start at the bottom, then work your way up. You might ask to see if their basic needs are being met, or if they have any immediate safety concerns or concerns around their basic needs. Then you can move into social and emotional needs before working your way toward educational needs. Some staff might benefit from a guide or some sort of reminder about this approach, such as the one shown here. You can access this guide in our presentation resources. Eventually, it will be important for us to talk about IEP implementation and work out a plan together for how that will look in your student's home. If staff take time to follow this approach and help the family with any basic and underlying needs first, they will be more likely to achieve a true partnership and educational collaboration with the student's family. Finally, let's take a few minutes to review some considerations when collaborating with parents. When considering collaboration with parents and caregivers to support students during non-traditional instruction, we might hope for an ideal situation. You know, where students would be in homes that have fully engaged and equipped and available adults who guide each student through non-traditional instruction activities, and they're willing to participate in specially designed instruction and other supports for behavior and social emotional learning. While this is ideal, it may be quite rare for a variety of reasons. So there are some considerations we should address when collaborating with parents. Foremost, we must remember that parents and caregivers are not teachers. Parents and caregivers are unlikely to have the skills, training, or experiences to be teachers, let alone fully acting in the role of a special education teacher for a highly challenging population. In fact, parents may be stressed and overwhelmed by the prospect of keeping up with instruction for their children, especially when they have individualized needs and require specialized supports. It will be helpful for teachers to keep this in mind when reaching out to parents to discuss possible collaboration, and to be cautious about asking too much of parents. There are, however, many parents who may indicate a willingness to collaborate around supporting their child, especially when there is support available from their teachers. There is a spectrum of possibilities for how educators might collaborate with parents, ranging from just keeping communication open to full engagement in instructional delivery. It will depend heavily on the current state and needs of the family. Families may be under a great degree of stress or challenge with other priorities during this time. If that's the case, it may be most appropriate to check in with the family and keep communication open, which in turn may help improve student participation in some NTI activities. However, parents may be motivated and able to participate to some degree. At a moderate level of collaboration, this may involve the parent providing some of the components of the IEP. For example, this might include providing antecedent prompts for the child, setting up visual supports in the home, maximizing predictability by setting up a daily schedule, or even delivering a reinforcer. At the more intensive level, a parent may engage in providing some degree of specially designed instruction. Now, this might be rare, but some parents may be willing and able to deliver key instruction to benefit their children when they have the proper support and resources. When communicating with parents and exploring collaboration, it will be important for teachers to consider the parents' availability, their interest, and their capacity. The following questions may help determine if collaboration is possible. Do they have availability to even provide any additional support? Are the parents at home? Maybe are they working from home? Are they tending to multiple children? Are they interested in participating as a priority at this time? Do they have the capacity, the skills, the knowledge and resources and coping skills to participate in delivering IEP components or specially designed instruction? If so, what training and ongoing support would teachers need to provide for this parent to be able to participate? The more involved parents are in providing IEP components or delivering instruction, the more training and support they may need. It's important that teachers consider what training and support are necessary and how to provide it to the parents. Simply telling the parent what to do may not be sufficient for more complex skills or strategies. So remember, parents may need some form of direct instruction and follow-up support. We've highlighted a few resources here that may be particularly beneficial for parents. The links will take you to reputable and helpful sites. We want to thank you for your time and participation. We hope the resources provided here will support your efforts to equip administrators, teachers, and parents supporting students with disabilities during virtual or non-traditional instruction. All the resources referenced in today's webinar, including the webinar itself, can be accessed on the Kentucky DOSE website. We want to thank our partners because the preceding webinar was created as a collaborative partnership with all of Kentucky special education cooperatives and the Kentucky Department of Education. Please take a few minutes and complete the reference survey for feedback and suggestions for future webinars.
Thank you to our presenters and for those of you participating today. The recording for today's webcast along with the resources will be available on the instructional resources page for special education on the Kentucky Department of Education website. Our next webcast will be the same time next Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. The topic will be utilizing the principles of universal design for learning to prepare for the start of school. Thank you again for participating, and we hope you have a great weekend.